to walk you through what we're doing for collaborative planning today. After talking with Ms. Miller, we realized that even though, the end of Module 1 feels kind of far, like, oh, it's in November, it's actually only 16 days away. The academic calendar for Baltimore City Public Schools lists the end of the quarter as November 3rd, which is a Wednesday, and then Friday's a PD day, which did make sense. So the scope and sequence lists it as the 4th of November. That makes sense and is also an extra day. So we're just going to say November 4th is the last day of the quarter, which means that not including today, because today is kind of already planned for and being delivered, there's 16 days left of quarter 1. So in addition to this recording, you should have been sent a link to a Google document, which when you open it seems, just ridiculously long and overwhelming. But I don't think it's going to be, because I am reasonably confident that you guys have already walked through and done the module study protocol, which is kind of the bulk of what you'd be doing, the information that you would need for this. So what we're going to do this week is look at how far, how Module 1 is going in terms of pacing, where are your students, and where do they need to get in the next 16 days, and then using that information and that reflection from this second step to streamline Module 1 to make sure that your students are able to access the EOM and you're able to get, good data from it, as well as those FQTs, because as we know, the FQTs really determine how students are going to be able to access the EOM. So within this document, you'll see step 1, information gathering. This is stuff that hopefully is pretty top of mind to answer, but if not, again, just go back to that module study protocol and you'll be able to just basically copy and paste this information. If you don't have your module study protocol handy, you can, just go into the teacher's guide, look at your module overview and the major assessments, and all this information will be there. So first thing, what is your Module 1 task? Hopefully you and your kids already know that and you've talked about it. Then looking at what's the criteria for success. This can be directly from the module overview, or this can be looking at the rubric that you're going to use to assess your students' mastery of the EOM and its skills and standards. Speaking of skills and standards, what skills does the EOM assess? Is it assessing their ability to write a sentence or make an argument or find and use text evidence? And then also, what standards does this EOM assess? Again, none of this is asking you to use any brain power. This is just information collecting so that we can use this later on. Step 2 is the same thing, but for FQTs. How many FQTs are there? Usually around 3. Again, what skills and standards do these FQTs assess? Now we're taking a little break to relax a minute before we get into the next piece. You've heard the phrase, trying to fit 10 pounds of flour into a 5-pound sack. Now we're trying to figure out how many pounds of flour you are trying to fit into 16 days. So when you look at the scope and sequence, which I'll send out with this recording and the document, what lesson did the writers of the scope and sequence think you would be on today? And what lesson are you actually on? Keeping in mind that while it would be ideal for those numbers to be the same, that may not be the case. And that is normal, and that is why we're talking about this today. So how many lessons need to be fit into 16 days? If you're on scope, it'll probably be 16 lessons, but if you're not, that's fine. How many lessons need to be fit in, and then how many FQTs does the scope and sequence say that you guys should have gotten through already, and how many have you gotten to so far? Just to get a sense, again, this isn't asking you any brain power, this is just information. Where are you, where could you be, and what needs to happen moving forward. This might feel like a time where you take a deep breath and give up, but we're not going to. We're gonna figure out how to take quarter 1, module 1, and leave them behind with a bunch of good information gathered on November 4th. So step 4 is where it's really going to ask a lot of you as the teacher. Steps 1 through 4, you might be able to kind of collapse together, but steps 1 through 4 ask you to think about what in your class, how have students done so far on the skills for the EOM and the FQT. Presumably they've been assessed on, the skills that lead up to them being able to do the FQTs and the EOM. How are they doing so far based on the data you've collected? And the same thing with the standards. What are the standards for the EOM and the FQT? And based on what students have already done with you in class, what are they crushing, and what do they still need some support in? There is an extra 5th question that I will show you here. So if your data shows gaps in 1 through 4 in the skills and standards, how can those be addressed within the remaining lessons? Which also kind of moves us into the next one. Which of the lessons and activities that are upcoming focus on the skills and standards that are going to be assessed by your FQT and EOM? So if you realize that you need reteaching opportunities, or if you realize that there are skills and standards upcoming that have not even been addressed by the lessons that have already happened, which ones are those? What are the lessons overall? What are the activities within them that really need to be prioritized as you're thinking about how to fit all of this learning into the next 16 days? And then also, one thing that has happened before, especially kind of when you get down to the wire, which is why we're trying to do this in enough time that it doesn't feel so dire, is teachers can sometimes accidentally overlook an activity because, it's dealing with one of the, the secondary texts or something like that. And then it turns out that that's actually a super important piece of research or data or information gathering or whatever that students need to be able to complete their EOM. So again, looking at what do students need, what research do they need to have done, what text do they need to have interacted with in order to be able to do the EOM, to make sure that we're not missing any of those. So once you have this list with 5 and 6 of the lessons and the activities that are the most closely related to and aligned with your FQTs and your EOM, your last step is to look at this blank calendar. This kind of background is what the scope and sequence looks like when you get it, but your blank calendar just looks like this. It just has blanks for all of the remaining days. I guess I can black out Monday and Tuesday. I'll just black out Monday since it's already happened. So just putting in here what's going to happen over these next 16 days. Where are the lessons going to fall? What activities within lessons are going to be really, really important on these days? When are the FQTs going to happen? When is the EOM going to happen? Based on what you know about your students so far, based on the data you've gathered, are you going to need, extra days to work on your EOM? But this is the place for you to really map out for yourself so that you can see, so that you don't get surprised, when November 1st comes around, what's going to happen over these next 16 instructional days. When you're done with this, just share with me, I assume you know how to share, but you just hit share up here. Excuse me. And you can share, just type in my name or my email. This will just allow me to give you a little bit of feedback or be dope, this looks awesome. Just so that, you've had a thought partner in this, and also as a CYA measure in case someone walks in and is oh, hey, I noticed that lesson 24 isn't a part of your lesson plan binder. You can be in collaborative planning, we talked about this and I planned for this and Rachel already looked at this. So this is just a chance for me to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we are moving as thoughtfully and carefully towards a streamlined, but also a very effective streamlining of the remainder of Module 1 so that we can just leave Module 1 behind and start again afresh with Module 2.